gosh, so many things have happened. I cannot believe it's day 2 already. My name is Felicia. I'm going to be your MC today, along with many other film blocks and center stage conversations. So if I make a joke once, twice, 3 times, just laugh every time. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I have a question. How many of you, if this is your first time at AFMX? Anybody? Yes? Welcome! Welcome, guys. Okay, so a little bit about AFMX. This is its 12th year running, which is incredible. So let's give them a round of applause. Okay, so this year alone, there are 81 films, 40 events throughout the festival, 6 venues, 7 center stage conversations, and 24 film blocks. So that's pretty incredible, right? Okay, so before we begin the center stage conversation, I just want to go over a few things. I just want to give a big thank you to all the sponsors, because without you, none of this would be possible. So let's give them a round of applause. Also, a big thank you to all the volunteers. Yes! You will see the volunteers everywhere. They're the ones wearing the blue shirt. So if you see them, just give them a smile, because they're working hard to make this film festival a success. Okay, so why are we here today? Well, we have center stage conversation number 2, building a more equitable economy with StitchCrew. The moderator today will be Karen Criswell, and she has got an amazing bio. Let me tell you about Karen. She is Vice President of Operations for DreamWorks Studio. Karen strategically and operationally supported the teams behind a slate of interactive games, music developmental deals, narrative films, and television productions that occurred during her 18-year tenure. Her time at the studio included 3 Best Picture Oscars for American Beauty, Gladiator, and A Beautiful Mind. Woo. Yeah, I'm not done. Karen left the studio in 2014 to become an independent production consultant for her company, Concept Films, with a K. During that time, she has completed various creative and developmental projects for film, television, documentaries, and emerging new media. Karen is currently engaged in producing compelling stories for the screen with a focus on unrepresented voices. So give it up for Karen.
Thank you. Thank you so much and welcome. We're really excited to have StitchCrew here. Before we get started, I want to do a little bit of a straw poll of the audience. How many of you in the audience have run your own business or are currently running your own small business? A show of hands? Okay, we got a few. How many of you have ever started a business so that you could produce a feature film or a TV series? Okay, I've got a few of those too. How many of you thought about doing something like that and just don't know either how to get started, what the resources are, or where to go to do that? Because today we're going to answer a lot of those questions for you. I want to introduce Gaby Eichenlaub, Erika Lucas, and Chris Lucas from StitchCrew, and they're going to start off. Erika's going to give us a little bit of an elaboration on the origins of StitchCrew, and we're going to find out a lot of information that's going to be really helpful for all of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being here. We're excited. We are not in the film industry, although we want to be, but never made it.
Yeah, we're interested.
But the background, so StitchCrew, we launched StitchCrew in 2017, basically because we saw a lot of talent in our region that was not getting capital to start their business, not to start and or to grow their business. And so as a result, we had a lot of young talent leaving the state and the region to go to places like California or New York, where they felt there was more of an established ecosystem that they can tap into. So that's how we started back in 2017. Chris is a serial entrepreneur. I wanted nothing to do with entrepreneurship because I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs in Mexico that started businesses not because it was cool or sexy, but out of need and as a way to provide for our family. So that was fantastic, but all of us business owners, we know how freaking hard it is to do it, right? Especially when you don't have the resources, generational wealth, and or networks to help you get started. So anyways, I wanted nothing to do with entrepreneurship. Chris was the entrepreneurial, but what I did end up doing, Karen, was I went into the investment route. So I became an investor. And so Chris would come home and talk about the challenges that a lot of the entrepreneurs he was mentoring and coaching at the time were experiencing in terms of accessing capital. And I was like, well, they need to, make the case for investors and all of that. And that's honestly how we started. It was a conversation over what investors are looking for when they're evaluating what entrepreneurs to invest. And Chris sharing some of the frustration with the lack of resources that existed for the entrepreneurs he was coaching. So we started StitchCrew as a nonprofit. Fast forward to today, we've supported over 200 entrepreneurs. We are very centered on equity, so we focus on supporting women, people of color, socially and economically disadvantaged entrepreneurs.
Awesome. So one of the things I was going to say is I think all of us here in New Mexico understand the idea of the youth sort of leaving here for more opportunity. And I think one of the things that the film industry has done here is started to give opportunity for people to stay. So I think that's an awesome sort of tie-in to the things that you're doing. What are some of the programs that you guys are running and operating currently that they might want to know about?
Yeah. So right now we're actually based in Oklahoma, but we do have nationwide programming. Right now we are actually in the middle of our OKC Latino Accelerator program, where we have a group of 10 companies, Latino founders that are based in Oklahoma City, and we're working with them through the basics kind of running their business, trying to make sure that they have their financial models set, their business model, their marketing set, so that way they can really grow and scale their business. For Latinos, we are great at starting businesses, but we reach this scale wall to not reaching that $1 million in revenue, so we're helping them kind of create a path towards that, right? We're also super excited. Tomorrow, actually, we're meeting meeting in person the 5 recipients of the Future of Women at Work grant. So we have 5 women founders across the nation that are coming here tomorrow to, as we present them their grant money, and then we're also going to do a retreat. So they're women business leaders in the care economy future of work space, so such a needed space. But we've also done, again, a lot of other programming. We started out with a tech accelerator. We also moved into inclusive beauty space. We've had a cohort based on women leading companies in the fem health space, an indigenous women accelerator, and then also did one, so that was nationwide programming, and then also did one that was indigenous beauty-led companies in Canada. So have a wide range of programs that we've done as well.
That's fantastic. I think it's great that you're bringing your recipients here, not only to experience AFMX, but also to experience New Mexico writ large. I know you said, Erika, that you've supported over 220 companies that have been traditionally overlooked by what investors and founders are ordinarily looking for. What are some of the most common challenges that I'm sure some of the people in our audience could probably relate to that you've seen entrepreneurs sort of have to struggle with?
I'll take that one. Well, entrepreneurship is really hard, so there's a lot of challenges, and we see a lot. But the most common challenge that I think founders are going to face, especially women and overlooked, founders and minority founders, is access to capital. Erika's mentioned that. So, a lot of these founders don't have the same networks and resources that a lot of us might take for granted. So, for them, it's hard to get that funding that they need to launch and grow and scale their business. So that's probably the most common challenge is access to funding. Gaby mentioned that we talk about, a lot of the basics of business, financials and things like that. So, another challenge that I see a lot is navigating those complex systems, whether it's understanding legal structures, managing those finances, or knowing how to market yourself effectively. I think that's a challenge. A lot of these founders are first-time founders in these overlooked communities, and so they haven't had the access to mentors and role models who can kind of help them navigate the intricacies of the business model, how that works. So, and I think leads to another challenge is dealing with self-doubt and imposter syndrome. I know that's a challenge. I mean, I've dealt with that myself. Probably everybody here has dealt with imposter syndrome at some point. So, just helping them understand their value and gaining that self-confidence to do that. I could talk about challenges for entrepreneurs, probably this entire panel, but I'll name one more, and then if maybe Gaby and Erika may have some more. But balancing daily responsibilities while trying to do your business, especially for women entrepreneurs who oftentimes are juggling caregiver roles at home. They're dealing with other financial obligations, and they're doing that while trying to build their business. So, it limits their ability to focus and truly on scaling their companies.
I would also add to something that we've seen with all the founders is having that community of support, especially as early stage founders. You are wearing all of the hats, which I think a lot of us can really relate to. You have to be the salesperson and the marketing team and the customer service team. So it's really wearing a lot of hats, and sometimes it can feel like, I just have to put my head down and focus, but really creating a community of support around you is super important. I think something that's sometimes missed.
Absolutely. Erika, did you have anything you wanted to add, or?
No, I think we could have an entire panel on the challenges. But one of the things, just to what Gaby said, we're staying at Hotel Saw, which, by the way, you guys have to check it out. It's amazing. It's owned by a mother and daughter team. The hotel belonged to her family, so she grew up in the hotel that was run by immigrant founders her immigrant parents, grew up there, went on to become a surgeon, and then came back and remodeled the hotel. Wow. So it's amazing. But I was reading her story, and one of the things that she says that I love is that she said, I told my team that when I took over, I wanted the hotel to feel for our guests like a second home, right? Like I wanted them to feel like a mom and pop business, but I don't want to operate it as a mom and pop business. I want to operate it at scale. I want us to think big, and I don't want to work at the hotel like my parents did from 5 a.m. to midnight, right? So I want to be smart in implementing the processes and procedures to be able to operate it at scale. And I don't know, that stuck with me, so I just added it because I think it's what Gaby is mentioning.
Absolutely. As a small business owner myself and a woman, I wanted to kind of hone in on the comment that you made, Chris, about the fact that women have added challenges. Some of it's just being taken seriously. It's like when you take your car into the shop and they think you know nothing about the car engine because you're a woman. I think that there's a sort of a stigma. I think people have forgotten that women couldn't own businesses, couldn't have a bank account as recently as like 1974 without a man to co-sign for her. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about VEST Her Ventures and why you chose to focus exclusively on women-led companies with that portion of your enterprise?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we established StitchCrew as a nonprofit in 2017, and then in 2020, because of the disproportionate effect the pandemic had on people, but certainly women at work we had an exodus of women leaving the workplace to care for loved ones, whether they were caring for their children, parents, grandparents. Caregiving is the second largest reason for why people leave the workplace, second only to retirement, right? And it disproportionately affects women because as a society, still today, we still expect women to do most of the work when it comes to caregiving. And so anyway, fast forward to 2020, after we launched StitchCrew, we were helping entrepreneurs, and then we get frustrated again with seeing a lot of women leaving the workplace. And so we created a community, basically a peer-to-peer community with women professionals from C-suite all the way to emerging leaders to solve for these issues, to get women together to talk about, it doesn't matter if we're in the film industry, in the creator economy, in tech, we're all experiencing some of the same challenges. So how do we get together, remove the shame out of some of the experiences that we're all going through, and talk about how we can build solutions together? So that's how we started VEST. And then because of what Chris just said and what you just reiterated, the care economy, again, because it's seen as an individual issue, right? It is your responsibility as a parent to take care of your kids. If you're a woman, if you're a mother, you're the one that takes off, or your parents and grandparents. So it's an individual as opposed to a community. because of that, there hasn't been a lot of investment, both in the public sector and the private sector, going into the care economy. It's an afterthought thing. So in 2 years ago, we decided to launch a $20 million fund that would invest in women-led companies building solutions for the care economy. So we know we need to catalyze these investments. We need public investments, but we also want to catalyze private investments. And we believe that women are best suited to solve some of these issues because we've been the most affected by them.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things you talk about a lot is the community. And I mean, everyone here who's been involved in the film industry knows it takes a village to make a movie, literally. And you see that in the credits. But I think it also takes surrogates, it takes advocates. I like to always go back, one of the things I like to bring up a lot is that there was one woman in Congress when Congress gave women the right to vote, right? You have to have advocates. So Chris, as a white guy, why don't you tell a little bit about why you're a surrogate and why you're an advocate for investing in women specifically and underrepresented voices, communities that you are not typically associated with, but that you are very much supporting as part of StitchCrew and VEST?
I guess that question has to go to me, doesn't it?
Yes,
I'm
it does.
the white guy on the stage. Well, so I'm married to a very powerful and intelligent and brilliant Latina. We have two teenage daughters at home. So, I mean, for me, it's personal. I mean, it's all about fairness and opportunity. You know, I grew up with access to networks, mentors, resources, things that many founders, especially women and minority founders, maybe don't have access to, or you know, things that I probably took for granted. And as I've gotten more into this, you know, entrepreneurial space, I've realized that it's been pretty clear to me that, you know, talent and potential are pretty equally distributed. You know, it's not a white guy thing, but opportunities are definitely not. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think it's definitely a fundamental issue of equity, and it's our responsibility to kind of help level the playing field. That's the why, you know, it's the right thing to do, probably answer. Erika mentioned we're investors as well, so if I put my investor hat on, I think I can make I don't think I know, there's a very strong business case to be made for investing in women and minority founders. Mm-hmm. That's not opinion, that's the data shows, you know, time and time again that diverse teams perform better. They generate stronger returns. Women-led businesses, I think Erika mentioned this a minute ago, women-led businesses are, you know, routinely deliver higher profitability. And when you invest in minority founders, you know, you're investing in overlooked communities, and you're able to tap into markets that are usually probably overlooked by more traditional investors. So, and there's a lot of opportunity there.
Right.
So, I mean, not only is it the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. And I would honestly say to any investors who's not looking at diverse teams or diverse founders, you know, you're leaving money on the table for sure. So, I mean, to answer your question, what do I say, or what would I say to white guys? Just, I would challenge them to, like, look beyond your own experiences, you know? Mm-hmm. There's opportunities there, and, you know, whether we realize it or not, systems have favored us. Mm-hmm. And that's not something to feel guilty about necessarily. I'm just saying it's something that we need to recognize and understand, and, you know, use our position to help create opportunities for others. And, you know, I mean, what do you want your legacy to be? And for me, it's just, you know, that path of helping them and being for them is a better route than just trying to maintain the status quo.
Absolutely. We talk a lot about diversity, and I think it's interesting because you talk about how investment often overlooks a lot of these opportunities. But if you go into a financial advisor, they're going to tell you to diversify your portfolio. Yeah. It's like we should be diversifying all of our workforces, whether it's in the film industry, with like what Ava DuVernay did with Array Crew. There's all these things out there, I think, that are being done. But again, I think that the more we bring those communities together, the stronger those initiatives can be.
And can I add something?
Sure,
Because I
absolutely.
don't know how many are familiar. So when we're talking about lack of resources and access to capital, I'd like to just give you some point of reference. So women represent 50% of the labor force, right? 50% of the population, 50% of the labor force. We own 40% of businesses in the United States. But when it comes to investment, venture capital, we only receive 2% of venture capital. 2%. This despite the fact that the S&P 500 consistently says that women-led companies outperform those that don't have women in the leadership. So I think it's just, because I think it's easy, you know, when I get on stage, which I'm glad, isn't he awesome? That's why I marry him. But glad that he's saying what he's saying, because when I say it, well, you're a woman, you're a Latina, you're an immigrant, like of course you're gonna be for this. But there's significant data showing, in fact, JP Morgan did a study saying that we are leaving over $4 trillion on the table by not investing in women and minority-owned companies. So that's as an investor, that's challenge like what? Like we're leaving money on the table, right? The second thing is, I know we're like the minority, but we're actually now the new majority if you put us together as communities, right? So why would you not, as the demographic shift, Latinos make up 20% of the population now, under 18, 25%. If you look at the next 10 years, we represent 67% of the population growth in the United States. I think that as a business person, it'd be stupid not to invest in that demographic, right? Like as consumers, as potential workers, as potential business owners. So I just wanted to give some reference, because I do think, you know, we welcome those conversations. We often do get approached by people by saying, well, you're trying to like shift the pie and, you know, move the slices or whatever. No, we're talking about making the pie bigger for everyone to benefit, not just women or people of color.
I appreciate that a lot. I think that we can all relate to the need for sort of expanding how we support and empower entrepreneurs to get their businesses up and running. You've all mentioned at one point or another in the conversation the access to capital. Access to capital, access to capital. We cannot say it enough. It is the number one thing that stops people, slows people down, keeps people from realizing their mission vision for their organization, or even starting it to begin with. Whether it's grants, microloans, or venture capital, what are some of the most effective financial resources available to help entrepreneurs thrive so that they can really reach those goals?
Yeah, I think the ones you mentioned there are, they all have their pros and cons, right? I would challenge whoever is looking at any sort of investment or grants or access to capital, right? What type of business they are really looking to build and how fast they really want to grow it. Because I think answering some of those questions, you can kind of work your way back, right? So if we talk about investment, venture capital, for that, you really need to be prepared to grow and scale really fast, right? That's what investors are looking for, and you need to be able to show that you can do that, right? But then at the end of the day, we always talk to founders in terms of where do you envision your life 1 to 5 years from now, and does that scale, does that growth match that lifestyle as well, right? So really thinking about it like that, right? And I think more importantly, it's just giving the access to or the knowledge of all the available resources that are out there, right? So we can make better informed decisions. Again, with investment, it is growth really fast, you know, it's money coming in, but then also you are going to have to share a piece of that pie, which is not bad, right? You have a bigger pie to share from at the end of the day. With grants or even bootstrapping, again, you get to keep the equity in your business, so that's super important too. But again, it's kind of limiting maybe scale potential, right? Even with loans, I think sometimes they can get a bad rap. There will be fees, you will have to pay that back. But at the end of the day, you get to the ownership in your business. So really just understanding what each capital entails, what each that you need to do in order to receive and or show that your business is where it needs to be in order to receive that.
and just sharing the knowledge of all the resources that are out there. I think it's more important than really pinpointing this one. This one is the best because it's very much based on the individual.
And I think it goes back to what we were saying before, like one of the challenges that we see entrepreneurs make sometimes is that you don't know what you don't know. And so right now, there's a lot of people, especially in economic development across the country, romanticize it with venture capital. And so now founders think that the only way to grow their company and scale is through private investment. But that's just because they don't know that like there's several companies that actually achieve scale. Sarah Blankley, MailChimp. There's several examples of how there are ways for you to tap into other forms of capital, not just venture capital. And I think it just goes back to a challenge, like if you're a first-time entrepreneur, you sometimes don't know what all of your options are.
I think that's very true in the film industry as well, because we have equity financing, debt financing, the tax incentives, which obviously New Mexico is very well versed in, and as part of our economic development plan to grow the economy of film. There's a lot of new things that are coming out. There's social impact financiers that are like looking for things that have social impact. And I think that it gets a little overwhelming when you start to talk about, do I do a bridge loan? Do I do gap financing? What's debt financing? What are all these things? It really does take somebody who understands finance and banking. And most filmmakers are like, that's not me, unless they're on the budget financing side of filmmaking. But most creatives have a real challenge with that. And I think, how do you guys help, or how do you think you could help people who are in the creative industries bridge that gap? Because I think that's something that's really critical for most filmmakers.
Yeah, it's not easy. It kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. Surrounding yourself with mentorship, which I know on the creative side, I know that's a lot of times that can be perhaps a lonely space, and creatives, they get into their zone, they're doing what they do, and there's maybe not a lot of time to bring in other eyes and thoughts to it, but you have to have people you can depend on and bounce ideas off on and commute with. So finding role models, mentors who have been in the industry for a while and can kind of help navigate the pitfalls of doing that is one thing. And just kind of going back to what Gaby was saying, there's power in options on finance side. So, Erika mentioned that, or at least, I don't know so much about the film side maybe on this, but, this perception of VC or bust, she was saying that there's so many opportunities now, and particularly for the creative economy, I think that there's more and more coming every day. So just being knowledgeable, doing your research. I know that's probably a really boring response to that, but educate yourself, because there are resources out there. They're not always easy to identify, but anybody who's been in the industry, I'm sure, Karen, you probably get mentor an up and coming filmmaker easily, and I'm sure you probably do that. So
I have to tell often people the dire news that yes, if you're doing a feature film, you have to create a small business. Because that's really what it takes for people to want to write you a check or to give you a loan. You need to have a business plan. You have to have a mission statement. You need to have an executive, sort of direction of how the film is going to be produced, marketed, sold, what the return numbers are going to be. You have to have all the same things that you need for a small business. You need to have a successful film. And to make it have legs, to have people want to write you a $2 million check. They're not going to do it if you just go in with a really lovely pitch deck. They're going to say, oh, that's a really great idea, but can you give me some numbers on the ROI? Because the people you're talking to for equity investment are investors. They're not filmmakers by and large. There's a few crossovers, but they're few and far between.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot. And there's a lot of crossovers, sounds like, with entrepreneurs that we typically see on a day-to-day, and creators and their coming. It's knowing your business financials and the foundation, and how do you make money? How is your film going to make money? How are you going to distribute? What are the returns on investment? What are your margins? These are things that are not
I mean, they're not sexy, they're not fun, but it's your responsibility as an entrepreneur or filmmaker or creative. And with your business, you need to know that basic foundation of financials in order to raise money, or to grow, or to even make strategic decisions for your business.
Absolutely. And I'll just add something because I think it's so important. Our slogan for StitchCrew is "Nobody builds companies alone," and we specifically chose that slogan because there is that. If you look in are there any traditional media here? But if you look at the traditional media and how they often portray entrepreneurs, who do they focus on? Like, just think about who they focus on, right? You think of Forbes. Yeah, like they focus on Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos. And I'll tell you their story. They always use the same damn story, which makes for a great story, but it's often not consistent with reality, right? They'll tell you the story of how these gentlemen are geniuses, long wolf, self-made billionaires that started in their garage with minimal resources and no access to capital. Again, it makes for a great story, but the reality is all these gentlemen, and by the way, I'm not shaming them, good for them, but they had plenty of access, right? They've either had access to capital, generational wealth, access to networks that can loan them or give them the investment. Hell, some of them went to Ivy League schools, and even if they didn't graduate from them, they started building that network. So anyways, going back to the nobody builds it alone and mentorship, I think that sometimes when we talk about mentorship, some people go like, oh, but how do I ask somebody to be my mentor? How do I mentor somebody? It could be your peers. Our program is known primarily by founders, and we get so many founder referrals because we build community. The best mentorship you're going to receive is from peers who are at it at the same time you're going through. They could be a little bit ahead of you, and they can tell you how they did it and what worked, what didn't work, or they can be going through it with you. And so just gaining that knowledge is better than anybody, like a corporate executive giving you mentorship, because they haven't done it. So find people that are going through the same challenges that you are, build connections with them, build a community with them, and learn from them, and share resources, right? Like give and take. I just think that's so valuable I don't care if you're in the film industry or whatever industry.
Absolutely. I don't think you can network enough. And I think I used to hate that word when I first moved to Los Angeles, and I would go to these networking events, and there was always all these actors there, and all the guys dressed the same and had the same hairstyle, and all the women looked alike. It didn't matter, what ethnicity they were, but everybody was kind of like, trying to do the same vibe, if you will. And I hated those events so much. But I recently went to South by Southwest, and I was exhausted. I felt like I had run an endurance race, but I walked away with 45 to 50 new real contacts. And 2 or 3 of those have now become clients. And I made a lot more friends, and I grew my network in such a way that, like, I really love that whole game show that you could phone a friend. Knowing who to phone is the most important thing you can know. You don't have to know everything about everything. You need to know who to call for the things you don't know. Because, like, to your point, Erika, earlier, you don't know what you don't know. You don't need to know everything. So I think that having organizations like yours and things that have those resources available, that's a good number to have in your cell phone to call. And now I wanted to go back a little bit. You talked a little bit about your slogan, but you also have a mission statement, and the mission statement talks about building a more equitable economy through entrepreneurship. I'm sorry, it's too early in the morning for me to say that word. And also inclusive economic development. And I know we talked a little bit about the diversification of investments and things like that, but what is the mission goal from your statement that StitchCrew would love to, what's the ultimate?
Well, first of all, I feel like I always have to say this. We're capitalists, right? So we do believe in capitalism, but we're also realists, and we know that capitalism hasn't worked for everyone. Right? We haven't had an equitable playing field where everybody can participate and benefit from the system. And so when we mean building a more equitable economy through entrepreneurship is basically democratizing some of that access to networks, access to capital, so that so that we're leveling the playing field for, and by the way, when we're talking about socially and economically disadvantaged entrepreneurs, we're not just talking about race and gender, we're talking about veteran founders, we're talking about rural founders, we're talking about founders with some sort of disability. I mean, there is just, it really is, we are the new majority. And so I think that I used to be, by the way, I'm a recovering economic developer. So I was the lead for economic development for the state of Oklahoma. I was a deputy director for the Oklahoma Department of Commerce. And oftentimes when we're talking about economic development, we immediately think of like, how do we support the big companies, right? Like here in New Mexico, probably in the film industry, how do we support Netflix, who grateful for the $800 million investment that they made and all of that. That's easy to justify, right? Doing an economic development incentive for that, or they're going to do a film industry. Let's give them tax incentive because, but what about the independent filmmakers? What about the small? And I always say, it's like we start backwards in economic development. We're always fighting to like, let's recruit Netflix over here, even if it leaves California, or let's, if it's an expansion, fantastic. But oftentimes we're fighting for the same jobs and they're just moving them around and just providing incentives for them. Well, what if we started looking at local entrepreneurs and started building them organically, right? Because that's how all of these companies started. They started at small at some point, and then if you push the resources and if you push the mentorship and if you push the community and you surround these founders, local entrepreneurs, local independent filmmakers with the resources that they need, they will grow. And they will build jobs, and they will, and instead of recruiting them and doing the full show and trying to like, this is why you should invest in New Mexico, invest in the ones that are already here, right? And then grow them organically. So that's what I know. Don't get me started.
No, absolutely. I agree 100%. I think everyone in this room would agree with those sentiments, because we're all living and working here in this system. And I do think that, and I live up in Taos, which is even a little further remote. We're definitely rural. We're rural. And I love it. But the opportunities there are very, very slim to none. And there should be a lot of opportunity, I think, every year for everyone. And that is that ecosystem that I think it does need nurturing and support. It's like permaculture is much better than agribusiness, but it requires a different type of nurturing. And I think that local support, the local empowerment requires a different type of nurturing, which StitchCrew is doing, which I think is fantastic. And we're really excited to have you here in New Mexico.